Russia's aggression in Ukraine since 2014 has been accompanied by substantial and relentless disinformation campaigns in which blatant lies have played a crucial role. Russia's hybrid information warfare was integrated into the overall attempt to destabilize Ukraine, and its aim was to undermine Ukraine's position both among the internal population and in the eyes of the international community, sowing doubt and confusion. In 2015, 28 member countries of the EU took the decision to set up the East Stratcom Task Force because of the conflict in Ukraine and the reality of COVID-19 infodemic in the spring of 2020. The EUvsDisinfo website was created as a campaign to raise awareness of the issues of aggressive Russian disinformation, toxic narratives, and weaponized conspiracy theories. Peter Stano is the lead spokesman for foreign affairs and security policy of the EU. He is a powerful advocate for the EUvsDisinfo website and resource, which is part of the EU East Stratcom Task Force to counter disinformation and the propaganda assault on the EU by Russia. Peter, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Before we get into the details, I'd love to learn a bit more about your role within the creation and advocacy for the EUvsDisinfo website and resource.
EUvsDisinfo, as you mentioned, is a dedicated website where the European Union basically publishes everything what we do in terms of fighting disinformation. We are exposing, monitoring, publishing disinformation. We are pointing out to the actors active in disinformation activities targeted against the European Union, and then we are trying to confront this misinformation or disinformation with facts. So this is the way the European Union decided we are going to use in order to deal with disinformation, because I mean, you can fight back with disinformation, but this is not our way. This is not what we do as Europeans. So for us, awareness raising, exposing is the best way how to make people's attention, focus people's attention to the fact that there are disinformation actors trying to undermine their trust, trying to manipulate their awareness. So we want people to be aware, and we want people to be able also to have the possibility to check the facts. And the EUvsDisinfo.eu is our main output for the public. This is everything what we find we are putting on this website, exactly in line with what I just described, raising awareness of people in the European Union that we are under attack, and this attack takes form of grave information manipulation. This attack is aiming at the European Union to undermine the trust of people in the national institutions, to undermine the image of the EU as a project. And we at the EU level, we are trying to deal with that through this website and related activities.
Well, before I question about what kind of resources you've got available, it sounds like there's a fairly substantial team. If you're doing continuous monitoring, if you're pulling together all of the disinformation narratives that you find across social platforms and the media, that sounds like quite a big effort.
Well, the challenge is huge. And the workload, of course, is huge, but one needs to say that what we are doing from Brussels, from the level of Stratcom colleagues in the European External Action Service, which has been tasked to do it by the EU member states, what we are doing is not observing all the disinformation or all the misinformation propaganda that is circulating and produced around the world. We are focusing on the main actor, or actors coming from or being linked to Russia. This was the original task. Now, over the years, we enlarged the scope. So we are not only watching what the disinformation actors related to Russia are doing, but also to those who are active in the Western Balkans and also in the Middle East. And Corona crisis has taught us that there are also powerful disinformation actors coming from or being related to China. So we are also trying to see what China is doing in this context of disinformation. But we are in no way aspiring to know everything, what is going on, everything that is being spread around the world regarding disinformation, watching all the actors. We are really focusing, our main focus and our main task is to focus on the disinformation coming from the East primarily. And of course, I said this is a huge challenge because there is a huge system and huge machine behind this disinformation that is linked to Kremlin. And in no way we are able to match it, simply because we are living in free societies and information manipulation is not the task for authorities in the EU. So if you take how much resources, manpower, energy, other sources, finances, the Russian state is investing into propaganda, this troll factory in St. Petersburg. So it's very well orchestrated, it's very sophisticated, it's very well funded. We don't do that. Our team, it's just few dozens of people here in Brussels. So it's few dozens of people with a budget which is not more than 15 million a year euros. That's not much, but again, we are not engaged in doing the same what they are doing. We are exposing it, and one needs to bear in mind also the fact that we are not the only ones. We are doing it from Brussels, maybe a little bit centralized, but the Brussels, the EU as such, is not really the target in English or in French. The target are our member states. So the local audiences in the local languages, in the local context, with the local history and social background. So what we do is also, apart from watching and monitoring and exposing the main disinformation tendencies and campaigns in the open sources and in the obvious sources like social platforms or media outlets, we are also coordinating and working very closely with the EU member states, with other partners, with NATO, for example, with G7, with civil society, with independent fact checkers, especially in our space, so in Europe and the close neighborhood. So it's a concentrated effort of many actors within the European Union who have the same aim: to deal and debunk, to deal with and to debunk the disinformation and expose their actors so that people know how to protect themselves.
And of course, Ukraine has been under disinformation warfare really since 2014, or at least that's when it really became apparent to many people. Is there anything that you've been able to learn from the resources, the techniques? I'm thinking in particular of Filter, the media literacy campaign that's been created there. What do we have to learn from what Ukraine has been doing to protect themselves?
Well, there are a number of good examples from a number of countries, including EU member states, how to deal with self-protection against disinformation. And the key expression you used, media literacy. Because really, if you want to fight disinformation, this is not a short-term effort. This is a long-term effort with the participation of a number of actors within society. This is not something only for the official authorities. To fight disinformation, you have to have everyone involved: official authorities, academic sector, schools, churches, trade unions, civil society, media, traditional media, media with established track record, and everyone who wants to fight against this. Because this disinformation attack is not only attack against our societies, this is attack against our freedoms. Because if we want to deal with disinformation very strongly, we would need to curtail the freedoms which we hold in high esteem: freedom of expression, freedom of media. We don't want to do it. So exactly, media literacy, very important point. Raising awareness, another one. Raising awareness, we already do with our work, with our cooperation within the societies. But media literacy is something really for individual countries to start to work on and introduce it in the schools, because we are living in information age. We are living in information societies. Information is a commodity, information is goods, information is instrument, and information is also weapon. People need to know how to use the information and how to consume the information. But this starts in the school. So this is challenge for our societies to really introduce the media literacy as soon as it gets into the school curriculum. You mentioned Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine, I can mention Georgia, because Georgia is also one of the countries which have been exposed since very long time to these Russian hybrid attacks. But within the EU,
if not earlier, yeah.
Absolutely. But look at Baltic countries, for example, within the EU. They've been exposed to Russian propaganda for decades. And since they regained independence, they've been exposed to constant attacks. So they have very good resilience. They are working on it for quite some time. Finland, for example, since the start of the Second World War, actually, this is the European country which actually led a war with the Soviet Union and won the war. So, and they were exposed to it, and they built over time a very strong resilience towards all these efforts coming from Russia to undermine them. So this is the way to go. There are examples both in the EU and outside of the EU, but one point is there, and everyone needs to be aware of it. Disinformation is here. It's part of the hybrid warfare. It will not disappear. It will only increase, because the information technologies are dominating our lives. and they are used to spread the disinformation, to generate and spread disinformation. And even if Russia is defeated in this confrontation between the good and the evil, then there are plenty of other disinformation actors who will be only happy to take Russia's place and who are active already now, not on the scope and not on the destructiveness of what they do compared to what Russia is doing. But again, removing one important disinformation actor doesn't mean that the problem will disappear. So we will all collectively need to work on strengthening our defenses because we are under attack, and media literacy is one of the weapons with which we can protect ourselves.
And of course, it's not a given. I think we all believe fervently that Ukraine will win and that the Russian army will be ejected from the entirety of its legal territory. But even if Putin is deposed, there's no guarantee that whoever replaces him is not going to continue the same information warfare or even adapt it, make it more effective, more pernicious.
Absolutely, the problem will remain, and regardless of the name, if it's Putin or if it's Shoigu or if it's Lavrov, Peskov, or anyone else, I mean, the problem is there. I think if you look at the history of mankind, the propaganda and the fight with disinformation was there, I mean, since mankind started to think and act politically. So this is not really new as a method. What is new are the means they are using and the dangers it constitutes in this interconnected, interdependent world, because information travels fast. And we are consuming information fast. We are not even double checking. We are not even like stopping for a second and critically looking at the sources. We are just consuming the information and another information, another information. There is no follow-up anymore to any kind of information that we are consuming. So of course actors will be willing to use it, and if not for political, then for commercial reasons. I mean, this information is not only what Kremlin is doing against Ukraine and us as political project. This information is also the manipulation that is being used to influence people's behavior, their shopping habits, for example. Consumer protection is a very important field when it comes to facing the disinformation, quality of the products, ingredients, the impact of the production on the environment, for example. So this is a wide field. We are focusing on the political communication and the dangers of political disinformation and propaganda, but the topic is much wider. So even if Russia is weakened, as I said, regardless of the name, the problem will stay and the methods will stay. So we will need to continue building our resiliences and our defenses to be able to deal with it and to protect our populations, because the effects, and we have seen it, there was not a political problem, we had a health issue during corona pandemic. The disinformation actors were spreading information which might not have been political or ideological, but it was dangerous for people, because if they followed this disinformation, like advice like drink bleach and you will not contract corona, or drink industrial alcohol,
sentiments,
exactly,
anti-vaccination messages,
so this disinformation or propaganda or information manipulation was actually threatening people's lives, because if you would follow their advice, you would put yourself in danger. You would either damage your health or you could die. I mean, there were cases when people died drinking industrial alcohol. So
that backfired spectacularly in Russia, didn't it? Because the uptake of the vaccine in Russia was incredibly low, and the death rate, not that we can really know what the true figures are, was incredibly high. So sometimes these propaganda narratives will backfire on the people who created them. But we also see that I think I share, your concern here, and it's not just that these are toxic messages coming out of Russia. They're actually developing techniques, and once those techniques are understood and developed and combined with modern technology, they're not limited to Russia. They'll be used in the US, they'll be used by QAnon, they'll be used by MAGA crowd. I mean, not to get too political, but these techniques and narratives, you can start to see them, they will be evolved in, say, the Soviet Union and then Russia, but once they're well understood, the techniques themselves can be exported.
Absolutely, and many of the things you enumerated, we are already seeing that they are happening also in advanced and developed democracies. Unfortunately, it's becoming part of the political discourse and almost part of the political mainstream to use misinformation, disinformation, or lies. And without any accountability, people are just taking what they are being told without critically listening and double checking. Or even if it's a lie, and even if they know that the information is manipulated, they prefer to hear this rather than the reality. So this is dangerous. This is a collective danger for our societies, and this is a collective challenge for all of us to try to deal with it in one way or another. And it starts really with the schools. I mean, the better the school system, the better the ability of people protect themselves, being able to distinguish, select the information, choose the sources, question the sources. So yes, I mean, exploitation of the techniques. In today's world, basically everything has been exported already because everyone is watching what the others are doing. So the Russian propaganda, the Russian disinformation actors, they are doing what they have seen from someone else being done before, or the others, the disinformation actors in Middle East, for example, in North of Africa or in China. They are also watching what Russian propaganda, disinformation is doing, and they are also adjusting their techniques in terms of using the bots, the fake accounts, the combination of official sources and unofficial sources. Basically, what is the biggest danger here? And you already indicated it, that propaganda and disinformation creates narratives that over time might be contradictory. But the big danger is that actually they bring people into the situation that they are confused. They don't know who is to be trusted. They don't know what can they trust anymore. And this is the danger, the long-term danger and the long-term damage this is doing. And for those disinformation actors coming mostly from Russia or from China, this is good because they want to undermine the free and liberal model of the societies we have in the European Union or in the West more generally. And they want to promote that, you see, I mean, everything is so uncertain, but only a country which is guided with a decisive hand of the autocratic leaders, they don't call them autocratic, of course, by the clear, clever leaders who are working for the good of the nation, only they can provide the real answers and make the life for you simple, conserving and protecting the traditional values and protecting you from all the decadence you are seeing in the West, because they don't even know what to believe and what kind of, I don't know, what kind of religion they should have and what kind of gender they should have. So this is the overall danger, and this is the overall aim, to sow confusion and to undermine people's trust in general.
Indifference, it's confusion. They don't want to necessarily convince you of their point of view. What they want you to do is to stop believing your media, stop investing your time and energy in your institutions and the beliefs that held your society together. In that way, it's a bit of a zero-sum game, isn't it? They don't really want to convert you. They actually want to destroy you and weaken you, because that will, at some point in time, help their objectives. I think a lot of people don't quite understand actually the motivations of much propaganda. It's not trying to convince you of a particular point of view.
Absolutely, they want to sow confusion, to undermine your trust in your state, in the model of the society you are living in, and at the same time offering the safe haven, saying, look, I mean, the environment you are living in, it's totally decadent, it's totally breaking apart, it's non-functional, and it's all run by, you know, this deep state or these murky groups who want to dominate your life. Whereas we are the saviors, you know, here you can have great life. So this is the better model of the society. So they, on one hand, they are promoting their model of governance or their ideology, and on the other hand, they want to undermine, discredit, and basically destroy any competing model of organizing the state and the society, in this case the EU, because they see, both those one from Russia and from China, they see the EU's model as the biggest danger, because the EU is an example that nations can work together based on win-win solutions, mutual respect, and where the state and the government is a servant of the citizen, not vice versa. That the rights of the people are bottom of everything, and starting from the rights of people, we are building the societies and the design of the society. So this is unpleasant for them, especially for Russia, because they have it in their courtyard, they have it at their doorstep. That's why they are so keen to destroy Ukraine, because they don't want to have Ukraine in their language environment. They don't want to have Ukraine as a democratic, modern, functioning European state, because it's a threat to the model Putin is building in his area of influence or wannabe influence for years already. He doesn't mind Georgia. Georgia is, you know, like geographically, if you look at it, okay, it's good to keep control. But having Ukraine or Belarus embarking on modernizing European path, this is a life-threatening situation for the regime he was building. That's why That's why he's trying to undermine both countries in different ways, of course, because he's undermining the state sovereignty and independence of Belarus in a huge way by creating the dependency of the illegitimate leader Lukashenko. But in Ukraine, he didn't find this useful idiot who he could use. So basically, he decided to destroy the country and destroy the nation in order to achieve his aims, militarily and through hybrid threats.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said this on the podcast a lot of times. You know, far more than sort of NATO, which really wasn't much of a threat. It had a very few ground forces, actually. They've been moved out mostly in the you know, in the wake of the Cold War ending. And he knew that NATO physically wasn't a threat. So that's quite an interesting little propaganda kind of line that's got a lot of traction, especially with the hard left and the hard right in the US, UK, and across Europe. But what he's really afraid of is Ukraine being a template, as you say, for how a society can transition from an ex-Soviet state into a pluralistic democracy. And I think there was a key statistic last year where the average income or the standard of living was going to accelerate beyond the average income in the main Russian urban centers. And this is a critical trigger point, you know, despite all the political chaos on the route to democracy. If Putin saw that Ukrainians are living better under a different model of society.
Indeed, this is the overall danger, and as you mentioned quite rightly, the issue of the NATO, this is not really an issue, and it's actually a very good example if you look into detail how stupid the propaganda is and how stupid this information manipulation is. They've been saying for years, the Russians officially and all those disinformation actors, that Russia is surrounded by NATO. If you look at the map, Russia is surrounded by Asia. It's not surrounded by NATO. NATO is forming like NATO member states. And the borders of Russia with NATO member states are 8% of the overall length of the Russian border. I think everyone agrees that definition of being surrounded is not 8% on the scale, you know, so it's being surrounded means 360 degrees. And this is really such a nonsense, but they've been quite effective in pushing this narrative. And there are people, even in Europe, repeating this narrative, like Russia feels threatened because it's surrounded by NATO. Well, it's not. If Russia would be attacked by the NATO, it would be from the very small fragment of its borders. So that's really absurd, and it only illustrates the absurdity of it, but at the same time also the absurdity or the scale of the challenge that we have to deal. It's not rational, it's not logical. What we are dealing with has nothing to do with logic and ratio and facts, because the hallmark of disinformation is really to create an impression based on nicely sounding argument without giving any consideration whether this argument is backed up by facts. Because, as I said, we are living in fast times and people don't bother checking the facts.
And because you obviously read tons of materials around the disinformation narratives, when you're reading sort of you know, newspapers or watching media in Europe, do you sometimes sort of get that jarring feeling that you feel some of those Russian narratives entering into the journalistic language, entering into reports you see in mainstream media?
Yes, that happens mostly when the actors spreading the disinformation or misinformation or lies are actually high-ranking officials like the president, minister of foreign affairs, or the spokespeople of the regime, because they say something and then, you know, agencies have the duty to report, and it sounds interesting and newsworthy, so the media are reporting on it as well. We had this example only last week. Putin had some kind of speech in some kind of economic forum, and he just dropped a remark, like he always does without checking any facts, that the Ukrainian grain deal, so basically the UN-sponsored deal about deblocking Ukrainian ports, which were illegally blocked by Russia, and Russia was preventing the exports of Ukrainian grain. So he said that this deal actually is not benefiting the poor and vulnerable countries to which this grain was originally sent, but that everything remains in Europe. Again, if you look at the UN statistics, you see that 2/3 of the things are going to Asia and Africa, and to people who actually need this stuff in the most affected countries, which were usually the customers for Ukrainian grain. So he just dropped something, and it was reported all around the world by traditional media. You know, without many media, without checking actually what's the actual situation. And you can check it quickly because UN is publishing just statistics. They are tracking the vessels, destinations, and quantities exported. And another thing here, for example, just to add that although 1/3 of the exports indeed went to Europe, one forgot to say that from Europe, it's being provided to other countries, either as humanitarian help or being then processed and then exported as with some added value, again, for those countries who need it most. And Europe as such was decreasing the imports of Ukrainian grain anyway, in general, over the last months, whereas we export more and more grain. So even if you look at the statistics, there is a huge disproportion proving Putin wrong. But again, no one didn't, or almost no one bothered to check the statistics and fix the things unless we came out with the explanations.
It's shocking, isn't it? It's absolutely shocking, because that just sounds like it's sort of sloppy and lazy. But going down the scale, I mean, without sort of naming any names, because no one wants to be sued, but there is bias as well, isn't there? And Russian narratives work differently in different countries. They're more susceptible. So some narratives that will work in some countries will not work in others. And I think there's particular problems, aren't there, with those countries that are more historically sympathetic towards a Russian point of view. And in particular, of course, thinking here, Serbia, Hungary, Italy, Greece. There are countries where different messages that wouldn't work in, say, France, Germany, and especially the UK, they do get some kind of traction, or more traction than they ought to.
Absolutely, and this is why these disinformation efforts are always tailor-made for a specific audience in a specific country, taking into account the history, the affiliations, the feeling, the emotions, etc., etc. Of course, Russian disinformation will not bother too much, or will not invest too much in spreading their narratives in Poland, which is country by default, like totally, yeah, opposed anything that is coming from Russia. They would try it on a selective base with the Baltic republics, but not because they think they can get through, but they have Russian-speaking minorities, and for them the Russian-speaking minority is enough to create troubles in the society, to create at least the argumentation, look, the rights of the minority are not respected, so we need to bring it to the world's attention. Yes, as you said, I mean, the disinformation activities in Italy, but even in Germany, are insane. In Slovakia also, you know, in Bulgaria, countries where the feeling of the either Slavic population or traditional conservative population is somehow still looking up to Russia as some kind of role model. I don't know for what, because I mean, even in the history of these countries, Russia did very many bad things, but there is this naive conviction about the Slavic brotherhood, or I don't know what, still remaining from the past, or religious links, etc. So they try where they know they have an audience, where they have vulnerable groups which are open to listening to their narratives and to spread their narratives. They would try it in France as well, by the way, because they look at the political spectrum. They finance some fringe parties, or not so fringe parties anymore. They finance some outspoken politicians. And then the politicians are again fulfilling the role of this useful idiot, spreading their narrative, or at least bringing doubts into the official narrative about certain things. So they have multiple sources, or multiple instruments at their hand they are using, starting with political interference and with information manipulation, using cyber attacks as well. I mean, it's not only disinformation, but they are really considering whom to attack and whom to target, and in what context, because as you rightly said, the audiences are different, and the reactions and perception in the different audiences varies very, very much, depending on the closeness, either geographical, language, ethnical, or historic.
So the project, I know your time is really limited, but you know, I'd love to know a bit more about the audience for EU versus Disinfo. How many people have you been able to reach? What kind of impact have you been able to make? And how do you measure the success of the project?
The success is measured in two ways. Basically, you measure physically the clicks on the website, so how many people come, how long they stay, what they are reading, whether they are going to hyperlinks and searches, for example. So this is the standard thing. And second, the certain measurement or certain reflection of the success is general awareness. And I must say, with a little bit of pride, that EU versus Disinfo over these years became some kind of reference, that especially people who are dealing with information or disinformation, journalists, opinion leaders, opinion makers, they are increasingly aware about this. We are getting a lot of questions from people around the world with offers for cooperation. We are getting a lot of input from fact checkers. People are interested in what we do, not only media. So you see, this is the overall awareness and image. Then it's not only the website. The website is there for everyone who is able to read in English, French, German, Russian, and we have few language versions as well. So general public is the main target audience. So anyone who has time and who gets the information that we are up there is welcome to read. So this is part of our awareness raising campaign. So it's really for everyone. We are also spreading a lot of information and references to EU versus Disinfo via our social accounts, so that the awareness keeps growing, not only in the EU, but also beyond the EU. And there is a lot of cooperation already with countries from beyond the European Union, countries of Western Balkans, Eastern neighborhood. Partially also in Africa. We have a lot of partners in Western parts of the world, in Canada, United Kingdom, United States. So everyone who sees the gravity and magnitude of this problem at one point came across EU versus Disinfo, and then either consumed it or even got in touch and in active interaction with us, which is good, and it's very encouraging, because as I said, there's only as much as we can do from Brussels with 20, 30 or 60 people. But then our strength as international community is in joining forces, because we are all under attack and we are all facing the same enemy who manipulates the information in order to mislead our people. And this is something where we need to devise the ways how to defend ourselves collectively.
And of course, a lot of the people I've been speaking to, especially in Ukraine, they're not necessarily government initiatives. They're private initiatives. They're people from marketing backgrounds, technology backgrounds, political and journalistic backgrounds. And it's almost like there's a whole ecosystem of innovation taking place. They're trying different techniques, trying different technologies. But I imagine your website and your resources can act as a kind of hub and a central resource that people can call upon and get inspired by, and then potentially go and create their own initiatives, which is the foundation of democracy, isn't it? Is getting involved.
Exactly, absolutely, and thank you for the compliment. I think it's a little bit of exaggeration to say that this is a hub. Of course, it would be nice to be like the central hub and the point of reference, but as I said, this is a collective effort, and a collective widespread effort needs more centers of gravity and more hubs, because I mean, regionally, I mean, it really varies. I mean, the nature of this information varies, the methods not, and the instruments also not, but still it cannot be centralized. So we are happy if we can contribute to it. We are happy if we can inspire. This is also the reason why we are doing it. And we are happy if we serve as a model for all the member states of the EU and other states that are taking measures similar to what we do. Because as I said, in the end, the battlefield is a national member state. It's not a supranational organization. It's really the member state. It's your audience. It's your electorate. It's happening within your environment. It's not the European or international environment, really. But yes, I mean, the cooperation is growing. The awareness of about this website and our activities is growing. We developed ourselves also to some kind of reference in these overall efforts, and we are happy to do it and join forces also with others, civil society, authorities, whoever is willing to fight this enemy.
And my last question, because I know you're pressed for time, what narratives do we have to watch out for? We're coming up for winter. There's a fuel war, there's a gas war going on. What are the messages that we have to be aware of that are coming down the pipeline, as it were, in the coming weeks and months?
It's very hard to foresee actually what the disinformation actors would take up as their most favorite issue, because usually they play with a number of narratives and they are very opportunistic, whatever serves them. So they embraced Corona because no one could predict that there would be Corona pandemics. So they embraced Corona and they started to work very hard, very intensively with all the disinformation that could be related to a health issue. Then we had the G5. That was another popular topic. Now is, of course, Ukraine, the so-called neo-Nazis, the genocide of the Russian speakers. Energy, as you rightly pointed out, will be probably a topic for next few weeks. But then again, I mean, as we progress more and more in building our resilience when it comes to energy diversification and finding alternative supplies, and I'm sure the EU will be able to solve this crisis, then they will not play with it anymore. You know, vaccines, for example, there was a strong disinformation campaign going on against vaccines. it receded because there was something else. So they are very opportunistic. Whatever place in the respective society, they will take it up. We have elections in Italy, so they take all the topics that are discussed in Italy or that resonate in Italy. So it can be health, it can be politics, of course, sanctions and impact of sanctions, all the crises in the world which are affecting people. So for them, it's important to jump on the wave of information that is somehow linked immediately to people's lives, people's well-being, people's pockets, because it's in the end it's all about money, you know, how people feel and what they think. So that's why it's very hard to predict, but we are here to see more of this Ukraine-related disinformation, all sorts of disinformation. At the start of the war, it was this neo-Nazi and genocide narrative. Then it was the biological labs, the sudden discovery of the secret labs, but it very, very quickly disappeared because it didn't get traction. Yeah, it was debunked, so there were no proofs, and we already knew that it's coming, so we were prepared and we confronted it openly. So and this is also a very important part of our job to see already when the campaigns are in the making, when the narratives are in the making, and to detect, they are preparing ground to launch something politically, and we preempt that. So energy crisis, food crisis can still dominate. Anything related to Ukraine, you can expect some kind of sensationalist discoveries about atrocities committed by the Ukrainian liberating armies or also troops.
Nuclear terrorism, that's the other big one over the last couple of weeks.
So basically, you name it. You name it. I mean, the spectrum is basically endless, and whatever serves their purpose, they would use.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. I know you've got to rush. It's an incredible resource. I'm so glad that I sort of found it. I'm going to be referencing it every day now, just to see what's happening, what's coming down the pipe. Good luck with it. And yeah, let's spread the message on resilience and media literacy.
Thank you very much. That's very important. Thank you for your interest. Bye.